Hello and welcome to another edition of the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken. As ever, I'm joined by my co-host and colleague Brian Dick, and also today we're joined by BBC WM's Richard Wilford. Hi guys, we all doing well?
Yeah, we're good. We're all good.
Well, thanks. We find ourselves on very familiar territory, don't we?
We do, yes. This podcast is designated to discuss some of the names in the frame to become Birmingham City's new manager. Obviously, earlier this week, Tony Mowbray decided to step down for health reasons. And ever since, there's been a few different names thrown into the mix, one of whom is Alex Neil, the former Stoke City manager, also of Norwich City, Preston. Been he's been around in the Championship for a number of years now. Also got a League One promotion with Sunderland on his CV back in 2022. We might as well start with him, guys. Vastly experienced, 3 promotions if you include one with Hamilton Academical. So, Brian, is he a name that stands out as somebody who could be a good suitable option?
Yeah, it depends what the brief is. I think I should probably describe and talk about the brief a little bit before we go into specific names. If the brief is to come back up at any cost, then I think you are looking at one sort of style of manager. If the brief is to oversee a footballing makeover and come back up when you are able to play attractive possession-based football, then that potentially might mean somebody else. If it is to find somebody sort of in the lower leagues, a promising up-and-comer, then that's something. If it's to go for someone who is got a proven track record, that's something else as well. So it all depends on what the brief is. To my mind, the answer to all of those questions is Tony Mowbray. Unfortunately, that name's been taken off the table. I think Mowbray would have been the ideal candidate to bring Blues back up from League One, albeit they probably wouldn't have found themselves in League One had Mowbray still been around. So, which is a roundabout way of getting to Alex Neil. I don't know that any of the names that I've seen publicly linked or any of the ones I've come up with myself or between ourselves massively light my fire. I think what you have to come down to is, do you want to get back up or do you want to play attractive football? I think playing both will be very, very difficult on a short turnaround with a big squad overhaul. So I'm going to give primacy to the promotion over the style. And on that basis, I think Alex Neil probably does fit the bill. Yes.
I think I'm inclined to agree with that because, I think he was only at Sunderland for 24 games in total, a few in the Championship after bringing them up, but they had a really, really good end to that 21-22 campaign after falling away a little bit towards the end of Lee Johnson's time. And I know he had a strong squad. He had the likes of Alex Pritchard, Ross Stewart was there at the time as well. But they played some decent stuff and eventually obviously went up. Then jumped ship to Stoke. And some people say, you're only as good as your last job. And I don't think he did that well at Stoke. I mean, there was a massive overhaul there in terms of the recruitment, wasn't there? Last summer, I think they started last summer with about 6 or 7 players. And there were various people signing those players. So it can't all be blamed on Alex Neil. But they were quite poor in the first half of last season before Steven Schumacher took over. And they weren't brilliant after he took over either. So they just about managed to stay up. In his first season at Stoke, interestingly, I was looking at some of the numbers earlier. They finished 16th, but if we're going by XG and metrics and statistics, then they probably underperformed. They were one of the teams that created, a higher number of chances. They averaged more possession, 52.8% possession, scored 55 goals, which is 12th. So probably tells you they didn't take as many chances as they should have. From 12.7 shots per game, which had them, the 8th most shots in the league per game that particular season. So, we look back at the Norwich promotion. Preston did quite well there, didn't he? Where he had 4 seasons, 7th, 14th, 9th, 13th. He's a very credible candidate in my eyes.
Richard, what do you think about Alex Neil's body of work? Bearing in mind that the Stoke City job is a bit of a manager eater, isn't it?
Well, look, and so too is the Sunderland job, by the way. So if you want to judge him on clubs that are a little bit flaky or in transition. Then he's done that in his last couple of jobs. He had greater stability at Preston, but didn't necessarily have the armoury to be able to get any bet higher up the table. He got very close to the playoffs in his first season there, but top half or around the top half in 4 years of the Championship. Preston, what sort of guy are you getting? A guy who's still young, which is interesting. He only turns 43 next month. He started as a manager a lot earlier than a lot of people. We know he's got a fairly hard-nosed image. He's going to inherit a squad. I appreciate that quite a few of them might move on, but players who need discipline again. And one of the things that went horribly awry last year was discipline. Once John Eustace had gone, that is something that you have to work hard at to turn around, because you look at the work that John and Troy Deeney put in to get the right culture at the club, and when that goes, you have to rework it. I think he might be the right sort of person for that. I don't think the stats necessarily show that he plays attractive football, but he does want possession-based football. You look at the way that Daniel Johnson was such a key player for him at Preston, that sort of central midfield role. It wouldn't be a huge shock if he was the sort of player he wanted recruited, because they're going to need some experience as well as some young players. But you can see why he's the favourite. You can see that reasons why Blues have almost certainly spoken to him. The suggestion is that they have spoken to him, and we know he was hanging around a little bit at Blues over the second half of last season. So of the options that are on the table at the moment, he is your Mowbray light. He's your safe pair of hands.
Yeah, he maybe doesn't set my heart aflutter potentially in a way that some of the other candidates or contenders that we'll come on to. But I do look back to his Preston side, because I saw more of them than I did of the Sunderland team when they were in League One. And his first iteration of his Preston team had sort of Jordan Hugill as the battering ram, didn't they? And they were very effective playing off his strengths. But then when Hugill went, he had a 4-2-3-1 system with the three attackers and the one striker. It was players like Daniel Johnson, Tom Barkhuizen, Maguire, I think, as well. And they were quite fluid in their rotations, weren't they? I thought, without saying that there was a false nine amongst them, they played the formation without necessarily all sticking to the same position at the same time. They rotated, and I thought he worked that really quite well. And it was built on a on a solid base of someone like Alan Brown in midfield as well, who's also I think he's a free agent, isn't he, as well? So I would love someone like Alan Brown down at Birmingham. Whether he thinks he's ready for League One football, we're putting several carts before several horses here. But I did like his body of work at Preston, and I also think, as you mentioned, Richard, about Sunderland, being a bit of a managerial reputation destroyer. I think getting Sunderland back up is no mean feat, given the pressure that there always is at that club.
No, absolutely. And the other thing he did like at Preston was stability. I mean, that for 4 years, you knew what you were getting when you were playing Preston. Yeah. And it was up to you to try and stop it. They had a method. They worked at it. He had a back four that was together for a long time. He knew how to use experienced players. He knew how to bring some young players through. And you're right, what he lacked once he lost Hugill, and Hugill's most effective football was all played at Preston, by the way, because I don't think he's going to have an Indian summer at this point in his career. The reality is that he got them as close, Preston, as I think they were ever likely to getting up into the Premier League.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, built on the rather prosaic charms of Ben Pearson, yellow card. I think that's his full name, isn't it? Alex?
The next one on the list is a guy who's been doing the rounds right from the start when it kind of became apparent that Mowbray wouldn't come back. Liam Rosenior, we watched his team obviously 4 times last season because Blues played them twice in the FA Cup as well as the league. They eventually finished 7th, and he was sacked shortly after the season had finished. It was quite a good squad though, wasn't it, that Hull were working with last season? You look at the names in there, guys. Jacob Greaves, a very good centre-back. Tyler Morton on loan from Liverpool. Fabio Carvalho. I don't know how they managed to get him in January. And obviously, Jaden Philogene scored a lot of goals and got a lot of assists. Probably the best Hull team that's been in the Championship probably over a decade, I'd say.
You've not mentioned Ryan Giles either. There, I think he was the pick of the loan signings. I think this time last year.
Yeah, he was definitely. I mean, they if we're talking about ball possession, they were one of the dominant teams in the league. 55.5 possession, 4th highest in the league. a lot of shots per game, 13 on average, 68 goals, which was about on the edge of the playoffs where they finished. But there was always a thing with Rosenior's football when you watched Hull. It wasn't like fast, energetic possession football, was it? It was a lot of slow build-up, and there was a lot of frustration with it, I think, even from Hull fans on occasions, especially at home where they really struggled to break teams down.
Yeah, he's the fit if you want to go by the book of what the board have said. He's the fit if you go by Knighthead's strategy of wanting total football. He is one of these modern merchants who wants a goalkeeper who can pass a ball. So he's got Allsop there, who Wayne Rooney coveted because they'd had him together when they were at Derby. He does like to play out. I think it's ludicrous that he got sacked because whilst you can name some of those great players, this is a whole side that for seasons before have been hovering between League One and the Championship and just evading the drop the season before. So he carried them quite a long way forward. Is it always easy on the eye? I mean, I suppose it's pretty that they're passing, but it is slow, isn't it? And I wonder whether he would be a sort of guy who would frustrate St Andrews if he was in charge. And I know, you'd probably have a better pitch to play on because I think Hull suffered last year at the start of the season, the end of the season, once rugby league is playing, that pitch wasn't as good as it might have been. But I wonder, as much as the board might covet somebody like Liam Rosenior, how much the fans would enjoy him.
Yeah, you can just feel already the Tilton getting slightly impatient with goalkeeper to centre back to goalkeeper to just that very slow, deliberate build up. And far be it from me to quote an owner and suggest that the owner knows more about football than the football manager does. But that was certainly Ikali's commentary around the decision to replace Rosenior, wasn't it? It was about the football and not being attacking enough. We don't need to confuse possession with attack. Because a lot of teams that have a lot of possession will spend an awful lot of time in defensive and middle thirds. I'm interested that you say that about Rosenior's Hullrich, because I felt with the team, the players he had at his disposal, I don't know that he did much more than score par with that 11. Is that unfair?
He's not going to hit the top four, is he? Ipswich have had the most extraordinary romantic season. The other three have got massive power and depth. So he was never going to break through with those. Albion probably as well coached as any team in the division. If their away record had been a bit better, maybe they could have broken to the top four. So he's competed with Norwich for sixth place. I don't think he's finished too far behind par. And there are one or two teams with greater ambitions who finished below them. I just think that it's quite a significant progression in one season that he'd achieved. But again, you talk about his version of football. Is it no fear football? Well, I don't know about you, but if it's the team that I'm following that's playing with the goalkeeper and two centre backs and passing it around their own penalty area, I'm petrified. I'm full of fear.
Depends who's doing it, Rich.
Yeah, well, even so, you're 110 yards away from scoring a goal. I'm not sure that's the area of the pitch to start faffing around with the ball.
Yeah, I remember Ryan Allsop playing out from his own goal line in that 2-0 win they had at St Andrews in October. That was scary. Moving on to the next one is a different one well known to us all. Gary Rowett obviously had the final 8 games of last season, got 11 points, kept 4 clean sheets in those 8 games, gave it his best shot. What are we thinking when it comes to Gary Rowett? Because he I suppose is, if United do really want to stick to their guns of what they said back in October, it's not Gary Rowett, is it?
Yeah, I would be surprised at this stage. I wouldn't rule it out completely. If the manager search is still going on in 2 or 3 weeks' time, then I wonder if they might arrive back at Gary Rowett's door. Is he a credible contender? For me, yes, he is. I know there's all sorts of people that want to end his managerial career for the selection of Oliver Burke at Rotherham. It was Rotherham, wasn't it, rather than Huddersfield? Yeah. But I think it was a 37% win ratio. I think that's what 3 and 8 works out at. A number of clean sheets with a team that was pretty broken and standards off the field that had slipped quite a long way. I don't think that's a bad return, to be honest with you. No, he wouldn't be the makeover candidate by any stretch of the imagination, but he's credible to me, definitely. Is he the easiest sell to Blues fans? A, does that matter? Yes, I suppose it does. I suppose we have to say it does. But B, mate, maybe people have got their preconceived ideas about Rowett because he's had a spell here before, haven't they? And they've lingered from there. For me, he would very much be in the discussion.
I would be quite confident of Blues being right at the top of League One if Gary Rowett was the manager. I'm not sure they'd run away with it, but that's never a guarantee anyway. I would be very confident that Rowett could get Blues to last the course and be in the promotion shake-up at the end. I think he is, like you said, Brian, he's the epitome really of a safe pair of hands, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Albeit, I'm not sure that he's ever managed in League One. I think he went from Burton in 2, didn't he, to Blues in the Championship. I suppose you look at Blues as his big job, his sort of his breakthrough job. I suppose the one he spent most at was Millwall. And I would say if a good manager is someone who gets bounce and league position for their buck, I think Millwall just outside the playoffs is a pretty decent body of work to my mind.
Yeah, look, the thing is, track record suggests some good things. 4 successive seasons in the top half with Millwall. Has never finished outside the top half in a season where he's had a full season. I think he inherited Stoke at a bad time. I think we've been over what Stoke are like before. He got Derby into the Championship playoffs. It was financial issues off the field that then caused problems for Derby. So he took the opportunity to move on. Problem is, he's just fluffed his audition. The Rotherham and Huddersfield games, I can't move past those because he had an opportunity there to show that he can break the shackles off a little bit, that he can be a little bit more positive, that he isn't going to be the safety first Gary Rowett that he tended to be before. And he probably had to be during his first spell at Blues. And Millwall fans will debate whether he ever quite opened up enough there when they had some really talented players in the last couple of years. But I don't understand what he did, particularly the Rotherham game. That's a game where you go out, guns are blazing, finish off a team inside 20 minutes. You can say, we were unbeaten for the last 4 games. That's great. But 2 of those were draws against teams who you've just got relegated with. And that's the really frustrating thing. He could have gently reinvented himself. I mean, in doing so, they'd have stayed in the Championship and it would have been a different debate as to who's going to be the manager of Blues now. But I don't think that would have sat well with the owners. It's not the fact that they went down because it's other people's work and other issues that really led to that. It's the fact that he didn't manage to take the handbrake off in the 2 games that really, really mattered.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that won't sit well with the owners, those 2 games. Rowett ultimately isn't to blame for the relegation, but I think the selection of Oliver Burke, sorry to mention it again, against Rotherham, really kind of set the tone for a slow, sluggish, poor performance. And that was
how
the
can
game.
you not mention it, though? You can't not mention it in that he was so far out of the frame that he probably wasn't within half an hour of the training ground. Some of the time, he probably was. But all I'm saying is I don't think that he was in the picture in the previous games. And as he tried to be clever with that, as he thought that, okay, that's the best route to get a bit of pace out there. If you really wanted pace, why not take a gamble on George Hall, who you might get a more committed performance from? I don't know. It felt it was beyond left field, but not only that, it was unnecessary. There were other options that would have been better for him in that game.
Are we really talking about the future of Birmingham City's League One campaign on the basis of one selection which was rectified at half-time?
I think it was too late to be rectified, though, wasn't it? Because Blues were, the performance that first half just sapped all the momentum they built up in the previous game against Coventry. They should have, like Richard said, they should have gone out against Rotherham and really put them to the sword in those first 20, 30 minutes. But I know they weren't helped by a big delay in play after about 10 minutes, but they were just, really poor and slow that day.
And the issue isn't that I don't think Gary Rowett would be suitable for the job, because I think he would. And I like him as a manager. And he had many, many problems to deal with during those 8 games that weren't about the footballers that you put on the pitch necessarily. The discipline had broken down and there were so many other things that he had to deal with. And it's really hard to do it when you're coming from the outside. But I just don't see the owners turning to him unless they exhaust other opportunities, because I think he probably fluffed that audition.
Okay.
Moving on to another candidate we all know well at this point, having been at the club for 7 or 8 months now. Ashley Cole, as one of the coaches, first joined the club alongside Wayne Rooney. Although it's understood that he was actually a club appointment rather than somebody Rooney requested to bring in at that particular time. I know from speaking to people that his enthusiasm and for coaching, and also his coaching ability has impressed people at the club. And at some point, we expect him to go on and become a first-team manager. But is this, at this point, with Blues in League One needing to get back into the Championship, is this, too big a risk to give it to a managerial rookie?
Go on, Rich, you can do this one. You've seen more of Ashley Cole's involvement than I have.
There's a reason I've written ages next to the people that we're talking about. Ashley Cole is older than Alex Neil, and his managerial experience is just assisting. Now, he's assisted Frank Lampard in his time at Derby. At Chelsea, he was more involved with the academy, and then he worked with him at Everton as well. He'll have got some good coaching experience there. I think there is a respect for him. Tony Mowbray and subsequently Gary Rowett got him involved. I think Gary Rowett might have got him involved more than he expected to when he first got there. That shows that they respect the work that he's doing and what he's doing on the training ground. Is this a job for a rookie? That's exactly the right question to ask. And I don't think it is, to be honest with you. I hear a lot of good things about him from people that I talk to around the club as well, who feel that he's going to have something to offer. It is unusual the way he was appointed. Whether that was a positive for Wayne Rooney or not, I don't know. The one training session that we had an opportunity to go down to last year, Alex, Ashley Cole was notionally on set pieces and was given barely any time to do anything with it. And that's not his fault. When that situation is, you've got like 3 minutes at the end of a training session. That doesn't get anything done, does it? So it's one of those. They could take a real punt on Ashley Cole and it might work out, but it would, at this point in his coaching career, be a punt.
The thing is, there's more to coaching. There's more to management than coaching, isn't there? Mowbray married it all together brilliantly in that he was obviously a very good coach, but also someone who could step back and let other people and advise them on how they should coach. But also the way he managed all of us, the way he managed players, was probably the best I've seen in my short career speaking to these people. So is Ashley Cole going to have the ability to do that as well? Because ultimately, Birmingham City is going to be a big fish in a fairly small pond next season. They're going to be the star attraction when the media does turn up, other than me and Rich every week. So it'll be interesting. It will be that's going to be part of the person's job. And Ashley Cole hasn't really ever struck me as someone who would be seeking the public gaze.
He's not fighting to do weekly press conferences by the look of it, is he? But then that's not been his brief. Just trying to tap in maybe into the owner's thinking. I'll give you one phrase: page impressions. Ashley Cole would be a sell around the world, wouldn't he? Because of his profile as a player. For me, no, it's not a job for a rookie. And like you, I'm just going to echo what you two have said. I've had conversations with people about Ashley Cole, and to a person, they've been impressed with his coaching. But if you want Ashley Cole as your head coach, I think you might potentially, as an owner, need to rail back the "we've got to get promoted" narrative a little bit, just a little bit.
And maybe part of the question there is, who does he bring in with him for experience? And that would be, who does he know in the game who can be the right-hand man who's been there and done it and seen it all before and can help him deal with the issues of culture, which certainly arose in the second half of last season.
John Terry finally comes to Birmingham City.
God.
Wow.
I actually,
7 years after Harry tried to get him. Sorry, go on, Alex.
No, I'm going to throw another name in that we haven't put down, but I probably think Frank Lampard, if we're talking, the ex-Chelsea boys, would probably be a more credible candidate. I know he's been out of work for a while now, but I think the early part of his career, the Derby County job, and then following out with his first season at Chelsea was quite decent to get that Chelsea side into the top four. I know it didn't go to plan the following season. Thomas Tuchel made him look silly by winning the Champions League. But I do think Frank Lampard's probably, when you look at the guys who were in that great England team, I think Lampard, Gerrard, I think Lampard's probably just got a little bit more about him as a manager. I think if he does want to go back into it, I don't think Birmingham City in League One is beyond him.
No, let's not forget the quality of the sales job that Tom Wagner and Gary Cook can do. And that's why, whilst Rosenior probably is going to drop out the frame, you could see that they could sell him on the project. And somebody like Lampard, 46 years of age now, it's taking him a while to get back in. It's about ego in the end, isn't it? Can he swallow his whatever ego he's got? And I don't find him particularly rich in that particular way, Frank Lampard. If he thinks, well, actually, I can carry this club for the next 5 years from League One to the Premier League, then it might be an attraction. His track record, other than at Everton, is pretty decent. And also that spell where he took over Chelsea towards the tail end of last season, where we probably would have achieved the same record as him, because it's just whether the players can be bothered on the day. But at Derby, in his first spell at Chelsea, working on a very particularly tight budget in the second one of those, and his ability to develop and bring through and encourage younger players, those sort of things are very attractive. If you want to be set to do a project for 4 or 5 years, if you could be lured into that, that would be quite an interesting outsider.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against that. In my limited exposure to him when he was at Derby and being around him in press conferences and matches, I found him very personable. I found him extremely articulate. I found him really quite approachable and genuine, given a bloke with that profile. Again, it's not about finding the person you like the most, but I think we potentially have alighted on somebody that has a bit of experience, has a profile, and has so far played some pretty reasonable football. Certainly that Derby team, albeit one with very good technical players. So. Yeah. I hadn't expected to come on this podcast and arrive at somebody, but yeah, I'm reasonably comfortable with that, I have to say.
God, I'm surprised there. Moving on to the last one we've listed down here. Dave Challoner, I know this guy's got a little bit of traction with supporters over the last couple of days. Guided Stockport into League One by winning the League Two title. 2 promotions in 3 seasons there, because they also won the National League in 2022. I've watched them a few times actually over the last couple of seasons, Stockport, and they are a very exciting attacking team. It's a little bit gung-ho in the way they play. They've got they've got 4 central midfielders sometimes. Sometimes they play a 4-3-3 or a diamond, and the number 8, one of whom we had as a previous guest on this podcast, Odin Bailey, play very high and score goals. Scored 96 goals in League Two last year, which was the highest in that league. 56.8% possession per game, 13.5 shots per game. So, he's hitting the targets in those metrics as well. Interestingly, it's not just kind of possession-based football with him. One of the stats that really stood out to me was that Stockport were the 4th most dominant aerial team in League Two last season as well. 29 aerial duels won on average per game. So it shows they can mix it up, and he's got a little bit of a plan B. Dave Challoner, anyone should Birmingham City be considering someone like him?
I think he's interesting, but I do think you may have to take, again, as I said about Cole, you might have to take your foot off the gas in terms of immediate bounce back with someone like Dave Challoner. That said, I think I'm right in saying that Challoner has never had a bum season as a head coach. Not with Gateshead, not with Hartlepool, not with Stockport. He's been pretty much playoffs at least in virtually all, if not all, of his managerial seasons or head coaching seasons. The interviews I've seen, I've not seen much of Stockport, but I've watched him I've done a bit of research, looked at his interviews, and he has a presence. He has something about him, and he is generally regarded as one of the rising stars of the coaching scene. So he's another one that interests me. Going back to my initial point about what is the brief, what is the number one priority?
Yeah, and my understanding is Blues have been monitoring him for quite a while. There's been a certain interest with Blues as to the development of Dave Challoner, who, having cut his teeth in non-league management. Obviously, he would have liked Mark Roberts to stay so he could coach him to get those long throws even longer, because he was briefly the world record holder, Dave Challoner. Stole the world record from Andy Legg, a former Blues player. I think he's one of 2 very similar candidates, one of whom you didn't put on your list for now, in Mike Williamson. 2 people who've cut their teeth in management in the non-league in the North East and have got a very good style of play. You know what you're coming up against Stockport. They are busy. They are up and at you. They are a very exciting team to watch. They and Wrexham were 2 teams that you couldn't take your eyes off this year, and to an extent, the MK Dons weren't too far behind. It's a stretch, because you'd ideally want him to have a season in League One first, wouldn't you? But Challoner is a very, very interesting candidate. And Williamson may be miles on the outside, but having known him during a loan spell when he was up at Wolves, he's a very intelligent, very articulate bloke. So these are the sort of ones that it's a different approach. It doesn't get the excitement online. It doesn't get all the hits that they covet, but they might be the ones that will do the job in the right way, play exciting football, and have Blues around the top of League One. I don't think you have to put promotion on hold with those sort of appointments. It's about how you give them a squad that they can coach up. And what you don't necessarily want is players who say, oh, well, who's he? Where's he come from? I don't know anything about him. You need the players to be on board if you make that sort of appointment.
I really like Mike Williamson. And I think, you're looking at a little bit of gravitar as well. And Mike Williamson played in the Premier League for Newcastle, didn't he? Played for Wolves as well. So he's played at the top level. I really like watching MK on the side. They scored a lot of goals last season and probably eventually ran out of a bit of steam at the end by losing 8-1 in the playoffs to Crawley. But I think he would be a shout. He's only 40 years old. He's not got much managerial experience, but Kieran McKenna was 35 when he took over at Ipswich Town. John Rosenior was 36 when he took over at Portsmouth. Both of those two guys have won promotion from League One in the last 2 seasons. So, Mike Williamson is somebody who I'd be quite happy with.
It's about, if you do go down the young guy route, it's about how those men carry themselves in a changing room, isn't it? Are they the top dog? Are they the number one? Are they the biggest voice? Do they have the strongest personality? John Eustace had a little bit of that. I thought John Eustace carried himself with an edge, and there was no doubt when you watched his training sessions who was in charge. I'd certainly, if one of these guys that we've spoken about, whether it's a Williamson or a Challoner, or a Scott Lindsay from Crawley, or someone like that, if despite their age they are that big personality, then that certainly shouldn't preclude them.
Yeah, and you are, when you start talking about the likes of McKenna and one or two others, you are trying to pick another rabbit out of the hat, because McKenna is a one-off, really. I know that the other guy following him behind has got a great reputation. But, it's why something like Michael Skubala have been linked on in terms of the bookmakers. It's just a bit too early, you would think, for somebody like that. But you just never know, do you? McKenna is extraordinary. To see him face to face, to see the things that he says in press conferences and interviews, to see the way that he works a team and gets them doing exactly what he wants. I fear for him if he takes the Chelsea job, as he's being linked with at the moment. But trying to find another McKenna is the road to real ruin, isn't it?
We were saying this yesterday, weren't we, Alex, that, Sam Morsey and Massimio Luongo, excuse the pronunciation, are now Premier League central midfielders. I thought Luongo looked washed up two or three years ago, and that is down to the structure that Kieran McKenna has brought. And you are right, we are in hen's teeth territory here.
Yeah.
I hope Blues don't get obsessed with finding the next Kieran McKenna, because you risk making a bad error in that situation as well.
Yeah, they're the best coach team I saw last season, and probably a number of seasons in the Championship. But Kieran McKenna, it won't be. Who knows? Maybe they'll find the next one, or maybe they'll go for someone more experienced. Any other names to add, guys, before we wrap this up? Anyone else?
Not really for me. I mean, I see Will still being kicked around. He's a trendy name, isn't he? And they certainly would seem to. Reading the piece you wrote yesterday regarding the importance of analytics and data, Will still would certainly, be open-minded about that. I feel so. He's an interesting one. Again, it's where you come down on the experience versus style spectrum, isn't it? So he's one that's interesting. I think we've discussed the ones that I would be most comfortable with at the moment. I think, Richard.
Yeah, I think I'm open to something. We could find something really left field. I would have all sorts of red flags on Will still. I think his track record is actually quite weird, and also League One. What does he know about League One? Maybe he's got the computer analytics that can produce the perfect squad, but it would be a heck of a punt again to go with somebody like that. Michael Beale at the moment, I think people have got to get over accusations that he's had from his Sunderland days. I know that he appears in the betting markets for it, but again, I'm not sure that he's going to take a League One job at this point either. Whatever his next job is, I don't think it'll be in League One. So I think the best runners and riders are probably the ones that you've got on your list there.
Lovely. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Richard, as ever. Thanks, everyone, for listening as well. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube and also on all of your podcast platforms as well. It's a big thank you from all of us and a big keep right on.